Léo Major, the one-eyed soldier who liberated a city alone. Imagine losing an eye in combat. A phosphorus grenade explodes in your face, permanently blinding your left eye. Doctors tell you your war is over. They're sending you home. But you refuse. You tell them, I only need one eye to shoot a rifle. Then imagine this. Your best friend is killed right in front of you by German machine gun fire. You're on a reconnaissance mission, just the two of you, scouting a city occupied by hundreds of German soldiers. Your friend dies in your arms, and instead of retreating, instead of calling for backup, you pick up his weapons, grab a bag of grenades, and storm into that city alone. For the next 6 hours, you run through the streets firing machine guns, throwing grenades, setting buildings on fire, capturing prisoners, and tricking the entire German garrison into believing they're being attacked by a massive Canadian force. By dawn, the city is liberated. Population, 50,000. Liberators, 1. This isn't a Hollywood movie. This is the true story of Léo Major, a French-Canadian soldier who refused to quit, who captured 93 German soldiers by himself, who declined medals because he didn't like his commanding officer, and who became the only Canadian ever to receive the Distinguished Conduct Medal in 2 separate wars. By the end of this video, you'll discover why a city in the Netherlands still celebrates him as a hero 80 years later, why most Canadians have never heard his name, and how one man's rage and courage saved thousands of lives. Stay with me, because Léo Major's story is almost too incredible to believe, but every word is true. Part 1. The Young Rebel. Childhood and Enlistment. The story of Léo Major begins on January 23, 1921, in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Léo was born to French-Canadian parents who had moved to the United States looking for work. But when Léo was just 1 year old, his family moved back to Montreal, Quebec, where he would spend his childhood. Léo's relationship with his father was difficult. His father was strict, often critical, and never seemed satisfied with anything Léo did. Young Léo felt like he had to constantly prove himself, to show his father that he was worthy of respect and pride. That need to prove himself would drive Léo for his entire life. Growing up in Montreal during the Great Depression, Léo learned to be scrappy and resourceful. Money was tight. Work was hard to find. Léo worked construction jobs, doing whatever manual labor he could to earn a living. Eventually, he became an apprentice plumber, learning a trade that would provide steady income. But in 1940, when Léo was 19 years old, everything changed. World War II was raging in Europe. Nazi Germany had conquered France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and much of the continent. Britain stood alone. And Canada, as part of the British Commonwealth, was at war. Léo Major made a decision. He would enlist in the Canadian Army. Part of his motivation was patriotic. He wanted to fight fascism, to defend freedom, to do his part. But part of it was personal. He wanted to prove to his father that he could do something extraordinary, something worth being proud of. In 1940, Léo enlisted in Le Régiment de la Chaudière, a French-Canadian infantry regiment. He was sent to New Brunswick for basic training, then to England for advanced training. For the next 4 years, Léo trained relentlessly, preparing for the day when he would finally face the enemy. That day came on June 6, 1944. D-Day. Part 2. The D-Day and the Grenade. Losing an eye, refusing to quit. On the morning of June 6, 1944, Léo Major landed on Juno Beach in Normandy, France, as part of the Canadian assault on Hitler's Atlantic Wall. The beach was hell. Machine gun fire tore through the air. Artillery shells exploded everywhere. Men fell by the dozens, cut down before they even reached the sand. But Léo made it off the beach, and once inland, he did something that would become typical of his entire military career. He acted on his own initiative. Léo spotted a German Hanomag, an armored personnel carrier moving through the French countryside. Instead of reporting it or calling for support, Leo charged it alone. He killed or captured the crew and seized the vehicle. It was his first major accomplishment of the war, and he did it by himself. But just days later, disaster struck. He encountered a 4-man SS patrol. He engaged them immediately, killing all 4. But during the firefight, one of the SS soldiers ignited a phosphorus grenade before dying. The grenade exploded near his face. Phosphorus burns are among the most horrific injuries a soldier can suffer. Phosphorus sticks to skin and burns at extremely high temperatures, causing deep, agonizing wounds. Leo's face was burned, and worse, the explosion destroyed his left eye. Medics stabilized him and evacuated him to a field hospital. Doctors examined the damage and delivered their verdict. Leo's war was over. He had lost an eye. He couldn't fight effectively anymore. He would be sent back to England, possibly back to Canada, for recovery and discharge. Leo refused. He told the doctors, "I only need one eye to shoot a rifle." The doctors tried to argue. Military regulations required soldiers with such severe injuries to be medically discharged, but Leo was adamant. He wasn't going home. His war was not over. Finally, his commanding officers relented. If Leo could prove he could still function as a soldier, they would let him stay. And Leo did prove it. He qualified again on the rifle range. He demonstrated that he could still shoot accurately, even with one eye. He was transferred to the scout platoon as a sniper. From that point forward, Leo Major wore an eye patch. His comrades started calling him the One-Eyed Ghost, and he became one of the most effective scouts and snipers in the entire Canadian Army. Part 3. The Battle of the Scheldt. 93 German prisoners. In October and November 1944, the Canadian Army fought one of the war's most brutal and forgotten battles, the Battle of the Scheldt. The Scheldt estuary in the southern Netherlands controlled access to the port of Antwerp. Without Antwerp, the Allies couldn't supply their armies advancing into Germany, but the Germans had heavily fortified the Scheldt, turning it into a fortress of bunkers, minefields, and flooded polders. The Canadians were tasked with clearing the Scheldt. It was brutal fighting in terrible conditions, cold, wet, muddy, with German resistance fierce at every turn. Casualties were horrific. During one operation, a patrol of fresh Canadian recruits was sent out and failed to return. Their officers feared the worst. The patrol had been captured or killed. Someone needed to find out what happened to them. Leo Major volunteered to go alone. He moved through enemy territory methodically, searching for signs of the missing patrol. Eventually, he found their abandoned equipment. It was clear they had been captured by the Germans. But where? Leo continued his search. As he moved through the Dutch countryside, he spotted 2 German soldiers walking along a dike. Leo captured them and forced them to lead him to their unit. When he arrived, he found more Germans. Leo, thinking quickly, convinced them that they were surrounded by Canadian forces and should surrender immediately. The Germans believed him. More and more German soldiers surrendered. Leo marched them back toward Canadian lines. Along the way, he encountered even more Germans who also surrendered when they saw the large group of prisoners being escorted. By the time Leo Major reached Canadian lines, he had captured 93 German soldiers, by himself. His commanding officers couldn't believe it. 93 prisoners, captured by one man? It seemed impossible. But there they were, 93 German soldiers in custody, all captured by Leo Major. Leo was recommended for the Distinguished Conduct Medal, the second highest military decoration in the British Commonwealth, for gallantry in action. But when Leo learned that Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery would be presenting the medal, he refused it. Leo despised Montgomery. He believed Montgomery was an incompetent commander whose mistakes had cost Canadian lives. "I didn't like him at all," Leo later said. He was too incompetent to be handing out medals. So Leo Major refused one of the highest honors in the Commonwealth because he didn't respect the man giving it to him.
Part 4. The Mine. Breaking his back, refusing to quit again. In February 1945, Leo was riding in a truck with several other Canadian soldiers, returning from a patrol. The truck hit a landmine. The explosion was massive. The truck was destroyed. Every other soldier in the vehicle was killed instantly. Leo survived, but barely. The blast threw him from the truck. When medics reached him, they found that Leo had broken his back and several ribs. The pain was excruciating. He couldn't stand. He could barely move. Once again, doctors told him his war was over. He would be evacuated, sent to a hospital for months of recovery. His fighting days were done. Once again, Leo refused. Despite the broken back, despite the broken ribs, despite being in constant pain, Leo insisted on staying with his regiment. He spent a month resting and recovering as much as he could. Then, still injured, still in pain, he returned to duty. His officers were stunned. How was this man still fighting? He had lost an eye. He had broken his back. He had survived a mine explosion that killed everyone around him. And yet, here he was, ready to fight. By April 1945, Le Régiment de la Chaudière was advancing through the Netherlands, liberating Dutch cities and towns from German occupation. The Dutch people welcomed the Canadians as heroes. After 5 years of Nazi tyranny, they were finally free. But one city remained in German hands, Zwolle. Population 50,000. And on the night of April 13, 1945, Leo Major volunteered for a reconnaissance mission that would make him a legend. Part 5. The mission begins. Into Zwolle with Willy Arsenal. On the evening of April 13, 1945, the commanding officers of Le Régiment de la Chaudière called for 2 volunteers. The mission, scout the city of Zwolle, determine the size and strength of the German garrison, and make contact with the Dutch resistance. Intelligence suggested the city was heavily defended. The Canadians were planning an artillery barrage the next morning to soften German defenses before a full assault. Leo Major and his close friend, Corporal Willy Arsenal, volunteered immediately. The 2 men were experienced scouts, skilled fighters, and absolutely fearless. If anyone could pull off this dangerous mission, it was them. Before entering Zwolle, Leo and Willy stopped at a farmhouse on the outskirts of the city. The farmhouse belonged to Hendrik van Gurne, a Dutchman who provided them with information about German positions, especially near the railway tracks. The 2 Canadians thanked him and set off into the darkness. Their plan was simple. Move quietly, avoid contact if possible, gather intelligence, and return before dawn. But war rarely goes according to plan. As Leo and Willy approached the city, they encountered a German patrol. Gunfire erupted immediately. Leo and Willy returned fire, but the Germans had them pinpointed. Machine gun fire tore through the night. Willy Arsenal was hit. Multiple bullets struck him in the chest and abdomen. He fell to the ground, mortally wounded. Leo rushed to his friend's side. Willy was dying. There was nothing Leo could do. He held Willy as his friend took his last breaths. Then Willy Arsenal, Leo's closest friend, was gone. Leo laid Willy's body down gently. Then he stood up, picked up Willy's weapons and ammunition, grabbed a bag of grenades, and turned toward Zwolle. Leo Major was no longer on a reconnaissance mission. He was on a mission of vengeance, and he was going to liberate that city. Alone. Part 6. 1 man, 1 night, 1 city. The liberation of Zwolle. What happened over the next 6 hours is one of the most extraordinary feats of individual combat heroism in military history. Leo Major entered Zwolle armed with 2 Sten submachine guns, a rifle, a bag of grenades, and pure rage. His plan was audacious. He would create so much chaos that the Germans would believe they were under attack by a large Canadian force. He would terrorize them, confuse them, and drive them out of the city. Leo ran through the streets of Soile, firing his weapons and throwing grenades. Explosions echoed through the night. German soldiers awoke to the sounds of battle and assumed the Canadians were launching a full-scale assault. Leo set fire to the local Gestapo headquarters. Flames lit up the night sky. Smoke billowed through the streets. The Germans panicked. They believed the city was surrounded. At one point, Leo encountered a German officer. Instead of killing him, he captured him and spoke to him in French. Leo convinced the officer that thousands of Canadian troops were surrounding the city, that artillery was about to rain down, and that the only way the Germans could survive was to evacuate immediately. Leo then released the officer, knowing the man would spread the word among his fellow soldiers. For hours, Leo moved through Soile like a ghost, appearing and disappearing, firing from different locations, setting off explosions. The Germans were completely disoriented. They didn't know how many Canadians were attacking. They didn't know where the attacks were coming from. All they knew was that their city was under assault and they needed to escape. Meanwhile, Leo made contact with the Dutch resistance. He organized them into patrols and positioned them at strategic points around the city. This created the illusion of a coordinated Canadian attack from multiple directions. By 4 a.m. on April 14, 1945, the German garrison was evacuating Soile. They fled east, believing they were escaping a massive Canadian assault. But there was no massive assault. There was only Leo Major. At dawn, Leo waded across a canal to ensure the Germans were truly gone. Then, exhausted, wet, and grieving for his friend, Leo returned to the outskirts of Soile. He found Willie Arsenal's body, picked it up, and carried it back to Canadian lines. At 9 a.m., Leo walked into the Canadian headquarters and reported, "The city of Soile is liberated." His commanding officers were stunned. Liberated? By who? Where's the resistance? Where are the casualties? Leo explained what he had done. One man, one night, one city. The commanders couldn't believe it, but when they entered Soile, they found Dutch civilians celebrating in the streets. The Germans were gone, the city was free, and it had all been accomplished by one Canadian soldier.
Part 7. The Aftermath and Recognition. Leo Major was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal for the liberation of Soile. This time, he accepted it. Field Marshal Montgomery wasn't presenting it, so Leo had no objections. But for Leo, the medal didn't matter. What mattered was that Willie Arsenal was dead. Leo had lost his best friend, and no medal could bring him back. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. Leo returned to Canada and tried to resume civilian life, but he didn't speak about his wartime accomplishments. Not to his wife, not to his children, not to anyone. He kept it all inside. It wasn't until 1969, 24 years after the war, that Leo's story became public. Officials from Soile tracked him down in Montreal and invited him to return to the Netherlands for a ceremony commemorating the liberation of their city. Leo was shocked. He had no idea the people of Soile remembered him. But when he arrived in the Netherlands, he received a hero's welcome. The entire city turned out to thank him. Children waved Canadian flags, veterans saluted. Leo was overwhelmed. From that point on, Leo returned to Soile many times. The city named a street after him, Leo Major Lawn. In 2005, he was made an honorary citizen of Soile. When he died in 2008, the mayor of Soile and other Dutch dignitaries traveled to Montreal to attend his funeral. Today, a statue of Leo Major stands in Soile. Dutch school children learn his story. At football matches, fans unveil banners declaring him the sole savior of Soile. His legacy lives on in a city 6,000 kilometers from his home. But in Canada, Leo Major remains largely unknown. Few Canadians have heard his name.
There are no major memorials to him. His story is not widely taught in schools. Why? Perhaps because Leo himself never sought recognition. Perhaps because Canadian military history isn't as celebrated as it should be. Perhaps because the true scope of his achievements is almost too incredible to believe. But the people of Zwol believe, because they were there, they lived through it, and they will never forget. Part 8. Korea, the second Distinguished Conduct Medal. Leo Major's war didn't end in 1945. In 1950, when North Korea invaded South Korea, starting the Korean War, Leo was recalled to active duty. He was 29 years old, married with children, and could have declined. But Leo was a soldier. When his country called, he answered. In 1951, Leo was serving with the Royal 22 Regiment, the famous Vandues, in Korea. The war was brutal. Chinese and North Korean forces fought with fanatical determination. The mountainous terrain made every battle a nightmare. In November 1951, Canadian forces were defending a strategic position known as Hill 355, nicknamed Little Gibraltar. The hill provided a critical vantage point over the surrounding area. Whoever controlled it controlled the battlefield. The Chinese launched a massive assault, overwhelming the Canadian defenders and capturing the hill. Canadian forces were in danger of being surrounded and annihilated. Leo Major was ordered to lead a counterattack to recapture Hill 355. He was given a small force of only 18 scouts. They were outnumbered at least 10-1. Leo didn't hesitate. In the middle of the night, he led his scouts up the hill, moving silently through Chinese lines. They reached the summit and launched a surprise attack. The Chinese were caught completely off guard. Leo and his scouts recaptured Hill 355 and the neighboring Hill 227. Then, for the next 3 days, they held those positions against wave after wave of Chinese counterattacks. Leo personally directed mortar fire by radio, calling in strikes on advancing Chinese troops. Against impossible odds, Leo Major and his 18 scouts held the hills until American reinforcements arrived. For this action, Leo Major was awarded his second Distinguished Conduct Medal. He became the only Canadian soldier ever to receive the DCM in 2 separate wars. Part 9. The Final Years and Legacy. After the Korean War, Leo Major returned to Canada and finally settled into civilian life. He worked as a pipe fitter and raised his family in Montreal. He rarely spoke about the war. His children knew almost nothing about what their father had done until they were adults. Leo's son, Daniel Aimé Major, later said, "For years, he hid it from everyone. We didn't know our father was a hero." Leo lived quietly, with humility and dignity. He visited Zwole several times in his later years, always receiving a warm welcome from the Dutch people who remembered him. On October 12, 2008, Leo Major died in Montreal at the age of 87. His funeral was attended by hundreds, including dignitaries from the Netherlands. The mayor of Zwol traveled to Canada to pay his respects. Today, Leo Major is honored in both Canada and the Netherlands. In Quebec, Leo Major Park is named in his honor. In Zwol, his statue stands as a permanent reminder of the one-eyed Canadian who saved their city. But perhaps the most fitting tribute comes from the Dutch school children who still learn about him. When asked why Leo Major matters, one child said, "He showed us that freedom isn't easy, that someone had to fight for it, and we should never forget that." Conclusion: the meaning of Leo Major. So what can we learn from the life of Leo Major? First, that courage doesn't require recognition. Leo didn't liberate Zwole for medals or fame. He did it because it was the right thing to do. Second, that physical limitations don't define capability. Leo lost an eye and broke his back, but he never stopped fighting. He said, "I only need one eye," and he proved it. Third, that rage can be a weapon. When Welly Arsenal died, Leo could have retreated. Instead, he channeled his grief into action, liberating an entire city. And finally, that true heroes are often humble. Leo Major never bragged. He never sought fame. He simply did his duty, then went home and lived a quiet life. Leo Major captured 93 German soldiers alone. He liberated a city of 50,000 people by himself. He earned the Distinguished Conduct Medal twice in 2 separate wars. And most Canadians have never heard his name. But in Zwolle, they know. And they will never forget. As the mayor of Zwolle said, "He is a symbol of our freedom." That is the legacy of Leo Major. And that is why his story must be told. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share this video. We've completed day 3 with 3 incredible stories of warriors whose courage changed history. Until next time, remember what Leo Major proved, that one person with enough courage and determination can change the world.